Hello everyone, this is Remlays from 40k Theories, and welcome to the September 2020 edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Now, let's jump into the questions. Brent Feast asks, quite a few actually, do you think there is anything GW could do to make Xenos more interesting to the average fan, or is Imperial fandom too entrenched into the hobby by now? Well, if GW want to make Xenos more interesting, give them more focus. It's that simple, pretty much. The more you focus on them, the more interesting you can make them. As far as Imperium fandom being too entrenched, considering the Imperium is basically the human faction, there is always going to be more attention on that faction in particular, purely on the basis that we are human, and therefore a human character is more inherently relatable than, say, an angry space mushroom. Does 40k have a species that is basically supposed to be the Greys? I think the closest equivalent is actually the Tau, because they got the big eyes like the Greys, and even though their skin is depicted as being blue, in novels is often described as being grey, so I guess that's the closest equivalent. Is the Astronomicon still completely obscured in Imperium Nihilus? If it's not completely obscured, then it is pretty much all but obscured, to the point of being near indetectable. Would Malice have a rival Chaos God akin to Khorne vs Slaanesh or Tzeentch vs Nurgle rivalries, or are such things reserved for the Big Four? As far as I'm aware, he doesn't have a specific rival apart from the rest of the Chaotic Pantheon. Pentadeuce asks, do you think it's possible for a powerful enough human psyker to generate a fake Wa field, and become seen as an honorary orc? I don't see why not, considering that psychic powers, extremely powerful psykers can conjure illusions and stuff. Yeah, I think that's possible, yeah. Do lightning guns count as Daka? Only if they make a big bang or crack sound like thunder, like a then yes, it is Daka. Voice of the Emperor asks, are Drukhari able to say Slaanesh, or if they do, will they be consumed by it? As far as I'm aware, they are able to do so, they just choose not to. It's kinda like one of those superstitions like, say, Bloody Mary, for example. Why does Trace in the Infinite collect stuff? Because that's his hobby, pretty much. Asbites asks, a little before his death, Conrad Curze made an effigy of the Emperor that magically started talking back to him, which then at the end forgave Conrad. What do you think of what was said by this Emperor, and do you think it was actually the Emperor, or just Conrad hallucinating due to his madness? Oh, let's not talk about the Conrad Curze novel, considering how much is just blatantly wrong about everything. Like, okay, after this conversation he gets his fake armor and his fake weapons made and he goes and sits on his throne, even though he wasn't wearing his armor. As far as I recall, he was literally just in a black cloak with feathers and wearing the Corona Nox. As for Conrad and the Emperor having a conversation, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility that the Emperor could have spoken to Conrad, but given Conrad's mental state at this time, it's more than likely that he was just hallucinating because of his inherent madness. I mean, he kept saying like, oh yeah, Sevatar, like, yeah, but he's not your first captain at this point in time. Shozahal's your first captain at this point, not Sevatar, he is quote-unquote dead. But yeah, I think it's primarily hallucination, but not entirely outside the realm of possibility that the Emperor could have actually spoken to him. Warrior of Virtue asks, an Assassin's Creed style game about the Officio Assassinorum. Your thoughts? I'd raise you a game done in the style of the Batman Arkham series. Austin Horner asks, in the book Devastation of Baal, upon Commander Dante's quote-unquote death, he is greeted by both the Sanguinor and seemingly the soul of Sanguinius before being restored to life by the latter. Is it possible for this to have actually been the soul of Sanguinius, or merely a near-death hallucination? I think it's just a trauma-induced hallucination, just an incredibly vivid one. And this is based on the Black Legion series, because in Town of Horus, when Iskandar Kaon and the others look for Abaddon and the Vengeful Spirit, they find the Vengeful Spirit and they find all these crystal statues. Now, Kaon senses that these statues actually contain effectively the resonance frequency of a soul, So like, these statues are effectively the crystallized souls of those that died during the assault upon the vengeful spirit. And in Black Legion, one of those statues is of Sanguinius, which would appear to imply that Sanguinius' soul is stuck upon the vengeful spirit still. So I think it's more likely, given that evidence, that what Dante experienced was an extremely vivid hallucination, because he was on the verge of death at this point. Like, he had just had the shit kicked out of him by a swarm lord. So, yeah, he's gonna be a bit messed up in the head from that. Brandon A asks, what happens when a sisterhood or regiment attack a world by mistake which was loyal? Would the higher-ups allow the planet to have revenge about that group? If it was attacked by mistake, like say through a clerical error, then I can imagine that particular clerk of the Administratum being quote-unquote punished. But then again, I can also equally imagine them saying, well, they were probably heretics anyway, so might as well nip it in the bud, or something to that effect. I doubt the higher-ups in the Imperial government would allow for revenge, even though some would probably want it. I think it's more of a case of, look, it was a mistake, let's not make this worse, but then again, this is the Imperium, so they probably will make it worse somehow. What kind of action figure from Warhammer Bandai do you wish to see get made next? Well, we had the Ultramarine, we had the Salamander, and we had the Imperial Fist. I think it's only fair that we get a Blood Angel in there at some point. Kenneth asks, does Rogel Dawn hate Sigismund? This is a debatable topic, whether Rogel Dawn flat out hates Sigismund or is just extremely pissed off with him, like say a parent would be with their rebellious teenage son. To oversimplify, Sigismund found God and then refused to do what Daddy told him to do, which understandably pissed Dawn off. So while I can see, Dawn being justifiably upset for not having his orders followed, given the fact that Sigismund pretty much gets named the Emperor's champion during the later events of the Siege of Terra, I think it's safe to say that Rogel Dawn forgave him at some point, or at the very least was able to look past the hatred. Zero Hits asks, are there any obscure abhuman strains that you think could use some more expansion, or that you just find interesting? I'd like to see some more expansion for the Scalies from Necromunda, the Lizardmen basically. Aside from that, maybe some expansion for the Longshanks or the Pelagas? Was it Pelagas? I don't know how you pronounce that word. The obvious joke would be the Felinids. Let us have our Catgirl Imperial Guard armies. Kind of argument. But no, I'd like to see some more stuff from the Necromunda Scalies, and considering how in-depth the Necromunda expansions have been getting, we might actually get them at some point. Lucanron asks, with Abaddon and Guilliman being comparable to an angel and demon from Christianity, with both having a legendary weapon and being the leaders of the supposedly light and dark, do you think that they'll eventually have an ultimate showdown against one another? I mean, Games Workshop could probably build up to that if they intended to kill Abaddon off. While it would be nice to see them fight, I can't imagine GW pulling the trigger on that anytime soon. How would Abaddon theoretically fare against a Primarch? Not as bad as you might initially think, considering that Abaddon was not only a top tier fighter during the course of the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy, but he now has the blessings of the Chaos Gods and Draknien, the demon blade that the Emperor himself couldn't destroy. He does have a chance at beating Guilliman, but at the end of the day, Guilliman is still a Primarch, who has the Emperor's sword in hand, so it'd be closer than one would expect, but I'd still have to put my money on Guilliman. With Russ confronting Angron during the Night of the Wolf in Betrayer, and reasoning that if the World Eaters and Angron don't try to fix themselves and the Butcher's Nails, there'll be nothing left for the Imperium after the Great Crusade has ended. Yet in A Thousand Suns, Magnus puts out a similar argument against Russ on Shrike about destroying the local library and culture, yet Russ says he doesn't care about if there's anything left as long as the Imperium wins. Is there an inconsistency in the writing here, or can we just excuse this with Russ being an arsehole and a hypocrite when talking with Magnus? Probably the latter, considering that Russ never liked Magnus as far as I can recall. I wouldn't put it past Russ for being a dick, considering, it's Russ. When has he not been a dick? I think the only Primarch who's been a bit more of a dick is probably Mortarion at some point in time, but hey. It could be more due to the fact that the World Eaters were effectively mutilating themselves to become pretty much uncontrollable monsters, whereas the Space Wolves, yeah, they were not uncontrollable, but you could still bring them to heel. And at the end of the day, if the Emperor said stop, Russ would stop. if the Emperor said stop to Angron, Angron and his legion may not be able to stop, if that makes sense. Brother Santodes asks, what are your thoughts on the theory of Horus not really being from Cathonia, and that was actually one of the two lost Primarchs who was the original warlord of Cathonia? I have never heard this theory before in my entire life. So without seeing any evidence or context for this, I'm gonna choose not to believe at this point. Sorry. Darks asks, I have found the heresy, where do I put it? In the bin, where it belongs. Heyo. And finally, Ghost Reaper asks, could the Inquisition be the ones behind the Lamenters' bad luck because of their role in the Badab War? They have done similar things to the Celestial Lions during the Third Armageddon War for speaking out against them. I doubt it very much so, because the Lamenters had bad luck long before the Badab War. I mean, all you gotta do is look at that one time during one of the Black Crusades, where the Lamenters were supposed to fight alongside the Mortifactors, and the Mortifactors went, ew, cursed founding chapter, no, bye, we're leaving you to die, and the Lamenters were like, what? Don't leave us! And they got the shit kicked in until the Ultramarines and the White Scars turned them about 6 weeks later. How does the Mechanicus recruit its tech priests? If you're born in the Forge world, you're gonna be a tech priest or a servitor, take your pick. Otherwise, if you're born from a non-Forge world, you can actually petition a tech priest to take you on as an apprentice. I think this was actually shown in one of the Caiaphas Cain novels, actually, because one of them, it's like the sister of one soldier ended up becoming an engine seer by being an apprentice. Actually, no, she wasn't an apprentice, no, because even though she was a skilled mechanic, she was lacking in faith, and that's why they didn't take her on to the Adeptus Mechanicus proper, if I'm remembering that correctly. Oh god, what was her name? Was it Felicity? Felicia? Something to that effect. And that concludes this edition of the Patreon Q&A sessions. As always, if you would like your questions answered, then click the link in the video description below and help support the channel by becoming a patron. Until next time, this has been Remlace from 40k Theories, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye!